15 minutes before the end of the service, and somehow a couple of us were able to duck out of the back of the service and play this album. And I remember how listening to that spoke to me. The quiet, the stillness that we be when we allow ourselves to be in that place, the messages come through always. Always. And it's that space, that gap of silence that allows us to really connect with Spirit, with God, with the universe, whatever your choice of words are for that energy. And how little we allow ourselves to do that today. We get in the do, we get in the gotta have this done and all the shoulds and all of that of our daily lives, especially with the media, with the technology always being attached to the phone. You walk into restaurants and you see a family of 5 sitting there and everybody's on their social media and they're not talking with each other. And we become further and further separated. Music has always spoken to me. It's always been that connection for me to Spirit, to Creator, to God. I remember one time one therapist had said to me, never lose the music that you listen to because it is your connection to that. It is your connection to that higher place, that Spirit that allows you to really connect with who you be. And that's what I'd really like to invite you to today, is that connection to you. Whether you believe or agree with anything that I say today, be great, but it really makes no difference to me. It's you connecting with you is the bigger part of that for me. You connecting with that part of you that connects with Spirit, with God, with your Creator, in whatever belief, whatever understanding that you have of that. That allowance that we can be for each other in that space is that connection, that communal experience that we all long for, that we've all missed for so long because we don't hear each other. We don't spend that moment of silence really listening to that other person. We've always got that commentary going on. That one you're hearing right now in your heads is what I'm talking about. Like, who is this guy? I like Reverend David better. I saw this guy was going to be here. It's 3rd week. I should have not come. I should have been at home. Like all these other things, right? And I would like to at this time really thank Reverend David for his listening to me. Because in certain parts of the world, this was never supposed to happen. Most of my talks that I've given, at least early on, were in the basements of churches, for those of you that can understand that. I did a lot of open talks in my earlier days. It gave me a lot of practice. I got to clean up my language a little bit when I'm on the ground floor, but that's okay, I can do that. I do it for my mother, not so well sometimes. But Reverend David's listening for me was the gift, one of the many that I've received from him. We met on a day a couple of months ago. I never knew that he was talking about doing this class on Eckhart Tolle, and he asked me to send him a quote for today's service. Eckhart Tolle, really? But we have that listening for one another if we're willing to tap into it, if we're willing to be with one another. I have you all to thank and I have you all to blame for changing this talk probably 20 times or 30 times in the last couple of weeks, because I know somewhere we're all connected to that and you've been chiming in on what your requests and what you would like me to talk about today. It's who we are for each other if we're really willing to stop and be still and listen. So all the way up until this morning, and now it's in boldface and it's in italics and it's in all my notes, which you notice now how often I refer to. The listening that we can be for each other without the commentary, without the running dialogue, to just be still and receive what that other person is trying to communicate to us without that chatter going on, without who we know them to be. Allow them to show up newly. When we go into a conversation with a friend or a spouse or a parent or a child, we have already a lot of files going on for who they are, for what they are, what they've done in the past. When we have those running, we don't have the space to allow them to show up newly. And what's really interesting about that is afterward, after we're done with the dialogue, after we're done with the conversation, we're wondering why they don't change. Why don't they be who we know that they can be? We have impetus on that. We have our projections and our expectations of them being something different than who they are, than what they are. Those judgments are not kind, and yet we've almost been programmed by our parents, by schools, by society, by churches in some respect, to be that. We have, if it isn't this, it's this. If it isn't this, it's that. There's always that contrast. There's always that playing it back and forth, rather than just being in that void in between. Being in that small little gap sometimes that allows us to hear who that other person really is. Not who we think they are, not who we think they should be, but who they are. Who they really are. Who they are in their connection with Spirit, with God, with Creator, with the universe, with that energy. It's really how we learn to get in touch with more of who we are. That divinity, that connection, that Spirit. As I said a minute ago, my connection to a lot of this began on one part of my path from quitting drinking and becoming part of the Alcoholics Anonymous program for a lot of years. And I remember sitting in a treatment center one time, and there was this guy who was 52 years old. He was from Flint, I'm from Michigan. I hope that's okay, I should have asked first. He was 45 minutes probably north of where I lived. Couldn't write. He couldn't read. And we were in group day after day after day, and I thought he was the wisest guy in the world. Because he spoke from that simplicity. He spoke from that connection that he was. Now, I don't know whether he was raised in the church, what his background was. I know it was cotton fields somewhere in the South. In a day that cotton conversation was not something, it was something that I had read in history books. It wasn't in the day. But time after time, he would speak of that peace, of that connection that we are. And I realized that the lessons that we really get are available in every moment of every day if we're willing to adjust our listening. Sure, we get them in churches, we get them in mosques, we get them in temples, we get them in ashrams, we get them all over the place today, especially with as much as there is with the self-help and the transformational world that's out there today. I mean, it's everywhere. It's probably 90% of social media to where that's kind of a weird conflict, but I don't want to go there today. It's everywhere. But where it's most prevalent is listening to the people in our lives. If we lower our barriers, if we shut off that running commentary, and we just be with the folks in our lives and just hear where they're shared from their conscious contact with their God, with their higher power, with their Spirit. If we are willing to quiet down and be still, we can actually hear that. I read Bruce Lipton the other day, and he was talking about 95% of us are programmed by the time we are 7 years old. by parents, by schools, by government, by society. 95% of what we're talking about, what we're thinking, is already coming from our programming. That means 5% is conscious. 5% of it is conscious. I don't know about you, but that's not really great odds. So it's about, to me, it's about expanding that 5%. What would it take to have it 6? What would it take to have it 7? This is like that. 2 weeks ago when I came here for the first time, it was like, whew, wow, this is another family I have. Kathy and Reverend David and Tammy and, I mean, a number of you that I met. It's incredible. We have these senses of community that are out there, and yet when we're in the grocery store, or we're, you know, at Canadian Tire, or we're running around getting gas or whatever, we're just so here. Rather than, what would it take to just give an extra second to that person as a cashier, to honor who they be, to just, not even words, just listen, just be with them just a second longer in your day. Just be connected with them just a little bit longer. We got no clue what their day was like. They could have had a horrific morning and still pulled themselves in to go to work, and just by our presence could shift their day. Not our speaking, not our actions, just by being who we are, that connection that we are to everything. Everything that has been, everything that is, and everything that will be. That connection is really who we are. When I was preparing this, I was talking to Reverend David, and he says 15 to 20 minutes. 15 to 20 minutes? Now, my friends that are out there that know me really well, we'd like to have him shut up in 15 or 20 minutes. So I'm not going to drag it out for the whole time. But I would like to invite you to, when we get to this meditative part of the service, is to really honor that today. And that was really, having not been to a Unity church in a while, that was a real meaningful piece of the service to me the last time I was here. It's just an allowance of us to be who we are with ourselves for a moment. It's something we don't do often during the day, is honor who we be. We spend a lot of time fussing and attempting sometimes to be with people. And oftentimes feel awfully neglected ourselves. And the greatest connection that we can be to Source, Creator, to God, is to be a greater connection to ourselves. That's the underlying bit with all of this. It's in the songs, it's in the scriptures, it's in all of it. To have us be a greater connection to us is the greatest gift that we can be to humanity, to God, to Spirit, to Creator. And yet it's really something that we honor very little of. So during that meditation, I just ask, in that quiet, where could you find a place to acknowledge you for the magic, the miraculous, the brilliance that you be? Whether it's something you've done and nobody else knew about it, whether it was, against all odds going to work one day when you just had the worst headache or whatever it was, and really know that that made your day to actually pull yourself up and do that. Doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't have to be the grandmother that picked up the car and pulled the baby up. But if we do that on a daily basis and acknowledge ourselves for the miraculous that we are, the brilliance that we are, the grace that we are, it's not arrogant. It's not arrogant at all. If we were created by God, which I believe we were, what is the greatest way we could honor that? is by honoring his creation, yes? So when we do the meditation today, find that in yourself. Find that greatness in yourself. Honor that brilliance, and maybe take it on for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days for yourself. When you hit the snooze in the morning and, another day, before you even get out of bed, just find and noticing a miraculous miracle that you've been in your own life. Something that you've created for you. Something that nobody may have ever known about, that you could honor yourself for. Thanks for having me.